Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Boss Body Podcast. This is Sarah Haas. I'm so happy to have you here today. And I have an amazing guest for you. We are really going to get into some good stuff. We're getting into the nitty-gritty about women's health, hormones. We have so much good stuff in store for you, and I cannot wait for you to meet her. Her name is Dr. Bindiya Gandhi. She's a double certified integrative and functional medicine doctor who helps women transform their overall health. She's also the medical director, and she's also the founder of Revive Atlanta MD, which is a comprehensive clinic focused on total body healing, including decreasing inflammation, improving hormonal balance, helping women get pregnant, weight loss resistance, chronic stress, gut health, and more. So, Dr. Bindia, it's so good to have you here today. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Sarah, so much gratitude for being here today.
Absolutely. I am so excited to tap into your wisdom and expertise on all things women's health and especially hormone health and what the heck is going on in our bodies. I myself just turned 53. I'm postmenopausal. I'm a breast cancer survivor, so I'm taking hormone blockers. And each of us has our own story,
Yeah.
our own individual physical things we're dealing with. A lot of them intersect. We're dealing with the weight creep, maybe our
hmm
midsections, growing a little more than we would like. Hormones are changing, hot flashes, night sweats, all of that fun stuff. And a lot of us really don't understand what's going on.
hmm
And also there's not enough education out there. I'm thankful that there's starting to be a little more talk in the
hmm
mainstream about
Correct.
it. It used to be no one talked about menopause. They just called it the change,
The
and
change,
mom
yeah.
had hot flashes and got grumpy, and hopefully it would end after 5 years
Right.
or even 10 years. So I would love for you to just start shedding some light on this phase of our lives and what's going on and what we can do to support ourselves through this time.
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody should be scared or fear menopause. I think it can be a wonderful transition. I know there's a lot of negative light on it. Yes, hormones are changing, but with the right tools and resources, you can actually glaze through menopause really nicely, swiftly. Unfortunately, physiologically, the hormones are supposed to change. Biologically, we're at our peak when we're supposed to have babies, and many of us are having babies even later. So I see patients in my clinic who have, get pregnant naturally or with a little help in their 40s, right? And so perimenopause is about 10 years before you actually go through menopause. And so we start seeing changes well up into I've seen probably like mid 30s for some of my patients, and it can go all the way up into, 51 is the average age for menopause, right? And this
Oh,
is definition is based on 1 year of not having a period or a cycle, menstrual cycle, right? And there's warning signs before then, right? So that's like that perimenopausal years where maybe you're not sleeping as well, or maybe you start to put on the pounds, you're gaining a little bit of weight. Maybe you start noticing that you're kind of feeling a little warm, a little flushed. So there are some changes that are happening, and your body is constantly talking to you, but sometimes we're not aware of it, and sometimes we're just in the hustle and bustle of life of, this is also the years, which is hardest because we're a sandwich generation, right? We've got younger kids to take care of, or maybe they're aging, maybe middle school, high school, whatever it is. And then we have our aging parents, right? So uh, a lot of life is happening at the same time while our body is changing, which then I think makes it even more intense and even more why women often feel like it can be miserable and problematic. But it doesn't have to be if we know what to expect and how to like move forward.
Yeah, it's kind of that perfect storm. Like you
Hmm.
said, I have two kids in college. My dad passed away. My mom's in her 80s. I know a lot of people who are caring for parents who are not in good health,
Yeah.
who are dealing with some serious issues.
Hmm.
And so you're trying to be a mom and a daughter and have a career.
Correct. It's
And
tough.
it's a lot. Yeah, yeah, it is a lot. And then with your body going through these changes and not always feeling our best,
Hmm.
it can be a tough time to navigate. And before we dive in any deeper, I would love to know how you got into this field. What brought you to wanting to do women's health?
So, I'll always tell you it's my own personal journey and story, when I got into this world, um, mainly because I was sick. I had this rash on my face that wouldn't go away, had been to the conventional route, had tried, spent thousands of dollars seeing the doctors and trying the prescription medication in hopes that it was going to work, and it didn't, right? The I would put the prescription cream on for a week or two, would stop it because I was feeling better, and I was like, okay, this is gone, and then it would come back, right? There was a lot more going on that I was not aware of, and I kept asking and digging deeper, and nobody was able to help me. And that's when I learned about integrative and functional medicine because I kept saying, do I have a nutritional deficiency? Do I have an autoimmune condition? And they kept like brushing me off. They're like, no, they kept switching creams and antibiotics and antifungals and antivirals, you name it. I think I probably wrecked my gut microbiome even more at the time, right? Because I was so desperate to feel better, not just feel better, At the same time, it was a very stressful period for me. I was in residency, so I wasn't eating well as I thought I was. I wasn't sleeping well. It was like exactly like a perfect storm. Like everything was all happening at the same time, and I didn't understand. I thought I was meditating every day. I thought I was doing my yoga and running, and I thought I was the epitome of good health, but really I was adding more stress to my body, and that, was basically a snowball effect, right? So, long story short, I got diagnosed with celiac, and that was life changing. Learned about the gut microbiome and women's health, and over the years, I'll tell you, I was also one of those women that didn't get pregnant instantly, right? It took me a little bit longer, and that was, depressing at the time because I knew I had all this medical knowledge, and it felt like I should have gotten pregnant easy, right? I was, again, thought I was the epitome of good health, right? So, learning more about women's health, digging deeper, and then having a mom who had breast cancer a few years ago as well, right? So, kind of watching her transition and dealing with, seeing how we can how we can approach it very differently, right? Everything doesn't have to be so negative. It sounds so negative and it sounds so awful at the time. But when you have the right tools and resources, you know, you can actually think of breast cancer as a, what's the word I'm looking for? As a silver lining, because there's so much that now my mom does things completely different than she did 10 years ago. So, all of this is I say all this to say, this has been a full journey for me when it comes to helping women. I'm not only living by example, I've helped a lot of women transition through menopause, lose weight, kind of balance their hormones, whether it's stress, dealing with the sandwich generation that we're in, and so that's kind of why I enjoy what I do today.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your mom, but I hope that she is
Oh,
in
she's
good health
thriving. Oh,
now.
she's thriving. She's
Excellent.
eats better, has lost weight. She's fantastic. Like I've never seen
Yeah.
her in such better health. So
Yeah.
sometimes I think that this is what's supposed to happen to have like in her case was like a wake up call for her to be like, you know
Yes.
what, I'm gonna make some changes.
Absolutely. And I can agree with that 100%. Having my own experience with breast cancer, and the biggest thing immediately when I was diagnosed, the message I heard is you are way too stressed, you do way too much, and you need to slow down. And so I wasn't listening to my body, and I
Hmm.
don't feel like we necessarily cause diseases.
Right.
Obviously there was something brewing in there, and I had a propensity toward that.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
with anything, with autoimmune or
Hmm.
whatever, you can counterbalance it
Hmm.
with with healthy activity, or you can tip the scales in the other direction when you have not so healthy. And I thought I was the epitome of health as well.
Yeah.
I ate
Yeah.
really healthy. I exercised every day. Heck, I was a nutrition coach, right?
Right. Right.
I never thought I would get breast cancer, but when I did, like you said earlier, your body talks to you. And for
Mm-hmm.
every woman, that's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was loud and clear. Guess what? Now you have to deal with these treatments and you're going to have to rest through this.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a huge lesson for me and something that I have carried now on since I'm
Correct.
healthy
Yeah.
into my regular life, integrating
Mm-hmm.
downtime,
Mm-hmm.
rest, self-care, plenty of
Mm-hmm.
time to sleep at night, and taking breaks when my stress level gets too high and not taking on too many responsibilities.
But it's so easy to do so, right? Like
Oh, it
it's so
is.
easy to
Yeah.
have, especially as women. And I think this is where some of us have hard time saying no. Some of us are like, oh, but I got to be there for my parents, but I got to take care of my kid. Like you're in
Mhm.
such a dilemma. And um, part of it that I think that I'd like to just kind of mention, and I know you talk about this too, is mindset. It really has to do with mindset. And Sarah, I don't know any woman that is not stressed. A lot of the women that come to my practice, everybody is stressed, right? But it's the question is, how do you manage and handle your stress? Because all of us are stressed, right? Just we're handling it differently and our coping mechanisms are different. And that essentially is what can either make you or break you.
Yeah. And I would love to hear how you feel like this impacts us during those menopausal
Oh yeah,
years.
yeah, for
Because
sure.
as we said, your body's talking to you. Yes, these symptoms are, quote, normal. It's a lot of women do go through the hot flashes and the night sweats and all those things that you mentioned, fatigue, not sleeping well. Can we make this better or worse
Of
by how we're
course.
living our lives? And if you
Yeah.
could give us some tips and some resources
Hmm.
on what we need to be doing, both physically, nutritionally, or whatever, as well as lifestyle
Yeah, for sure. I
hacks,
mean,
mindset.
I know you talk about this all the time, but one of the things that I highly recommend to a majority of my patients is start with the basics of nutrition. Let's go back to what you're putting in your body, what you're putting in your mouth, making sure you're getting, enough water, good quality water, but also getting enough protein. Are you getting enough protein in your diet? Protein controls your blood sugars as well. It also helps your metabolism. It also helps, um, you know, GLP-1 natural reproduction, so all protein is a must, especially one of the things that happens as we age is we start losing muscle mass, right? And so we're under protein anyway, right? And so this is why our testosterone is declining and this is why we have no libido and we're feeling slightly depressed, right? And you may be hitting the gym really hard, but you're not seeing any progress or results because of your testosterone. So, one of the things I really encourage is really make sure you're getting enough protein, one at minimum 1 gram per pound ideal body weight, right? So focus on protein and make sure you're getting enough veggies. That's the other thing I'll always say. We're not eating enough veggies, and I'm guilty of this too. We need the fiber. We need it for
Oh,
again,
yes.
our blood sugars, for our gut microbiome. So many reasons, but just focusing on, asking yourself every single day, every single meal, did I get enough water today? Did I get enough protein? Did I get enough veggies? If you just ask those three questions, you know what? You're probably doing 80% better than the average person. It's just focusing on those three things, you're already winning.
Yeah. And I love that you pointed that out because I preach protein to my women all the time because
Yeah.
women are dramatically under eating
Oh, yeah.
protein. And being a personal trainer, I know the importance of muscle, and you cannot build muscle without eating protein. And muscle increases your metabolism, which contributes to weight loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Yep.
I like what you said in talking about eating more protein, eating your fruits and vegetables with the protein and the fiber, that affects your insulin
Mm-hmm.
levels,
Yep.
which is a hormone. And I don't think a lot of women realize that. When we think menopause, we think immediately think estrogen. And we're like, well, what are you going to do about that? Our body stops making estrogen. You're not going to have as much, so you're just going to feel like crap. But
Hmm.
there's a heck of a lot more hormones
There's
going
a
on. You
lot
mentioned
of communication.
testosterone,
Yeah.
and building muscle can
Yeah.
boost your testosterone. And then insulin's a hormone that
Yeah.
reacts,
Yeah.
interacts. They all are intertwined. Can
And
you talk about?
we haven't even talked about cortisol and
Oh,
progesterone. There's so
yeah.
many.
Yes, yes. Cortisol, yeah, those are your stress hormones, and
Hmm.
those are affected by your stress
Yeah.
levels. So, okay, so we've got the protein down.
Hmm.
We've got the eat fruits and veggies because that's going to help with our blood sugar.
Yes.
That's going to give us plenty of fiber. And then what's the next step?
So then, once you're, once you've got that down really well, then I'm going to start encouraging some movement into the day, into the diet, into the regimen, right? So, I am a huge fan of walking. Walk every day. Get your 10,000 steps a day, to the best of your ability. And you know what? There are going to be days that you only hit 7,000, but if you make it up on the weekend, hey, that's perfect. If you hit 14,000 on a Saturday because you went for a longer walk, but you only hit 7,000 on one day. I always talk about the average, right? Because we know life is hectic and there's some days that you're sitting more than others, right? But just getting some movement in, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just walking will do you good. And then once you're comfortable and you have that down packed, then I'm gonna say, hey, let's add some strength training because now you're menopausal or perimenopausal. You start losing muscle mass. I start worrying about osteoporosis, osteopenia for you. So I want to preserve your bones. I want to preserve your muscles. And this is the time we start thinking about, I want to live longer. I want to be able to carry my grandkids. I want to be able to travel to Japan and do all these like fun things, right? So you need muscle mass for that. So strength training is really important. And again, I encourage, finding a regimen that works for you. These days there's apps, there's classes, there's so many different options. Going to a gym, getting a personal trainer, there's so many different ways to get some strength training in, but just doing it and finding some activity that you love so you can actually grow the muscles and we can see some changes in your body.
Heck yeah, you are speaking my language right now because I am all about women have got to not just preserve muscle mass, but build.
Hmm.
And growing up back in like the 70s and 80s, well, in the 80s, it started to kind of women's fitness started becoming
Right,
more
exactly.
popular. But before that, 70s, 60s, women who are now postmenopausal,
Yeah.
building muscle wasn't a thing. It
No.
was just kind of like try to lose weight. Like, yeah, we want to be skinny, but muscle wasn't on the radar really. And I was reading the other day that gyms are now starting to transition over to, because when you walk in the gym, there's a bazillion stair climbers and
Yes,
treadmills. And then there's
yes.
a little area of this, weight machines and a
Right.
little area of free weights, and all the guys are taking up that
Yeah,
whole
and it's
section.
intimidating. I totally get it. I'm
Right, but
intimidated when I go too.
women are starting to
Yeah.
build more strength training in, and
Yes.
you're seeing more there, and the gyms are responding now by the cardio is important. Like,
Oh,
I'm
of
not
course. Oh,
downplaying
of
that in
course.
any, I
Yes.
agree with you 100%. We need to be walking all the time, our heart,
Right.
lungs,
Yeah.
get the blood pumping, all of that. But eventually incorporating that strength training is
Mm-hmm.
is huge for your,
Mm-hmm.
just like you said. I mean, the bone, keeping your bone mass, keeping your strength. And I know I want to be able to do whatever I want to do. If I want to
Yes.
hike, if I want to travel, if I eventually have grandkids, I
Of
want to be able
course.
to jump in the pool with them,
Of
play, run
course.
around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this menopausal phase is when that becomes
Mm-hmm.
critical
Mm-hmm.
because you start losing bone density and you're losing muscle mass. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like if you don't use it,
You lose
you're
it.
gonna lose it. And that's where
Yeah.
you start looking down the road at breaking a hip and,
Yes. Yes.
or not being able to get around very well. And Nobody wants that.
No, no. And I really am a big proponent of it. Did you get enough protein? Did you do your strength training? Those two go hand in hand, right? And I think even before, even before you get to your perimenopausal years, I wish I did that in my 20s. I didn't know any better. I did a lot of cardio and I did a lot of
Me
yoga,
too.
and that's wonderful. And I'm so glad I did a lot of cardio and yoga. But I wish I had built more muscle when my testosterone was naturally high at its peak, right? And now it's like, obviously dwindling down, but that's different, right? It's you don't know what you don't know. But I empower people to say, even in your 20s and 30s, build that muscle.
Yeah. So all of these can help the testosterone, and we haven't even talked about lowering stress because
Oh
that
no.
lowers the cortisol and
Yes.
all of that, which we might get time to talk about that. We might not. But I want to talk about the other hormones because those are the ones we always hear, estrogen and
Right.
progesterone.
Right.
So are these things we're doing, eating well and starting to incorporate exercise, helping with those? Is it hopeless? Is there something? Because those are causing some of these side effects that we're
Yeah, I
having.
will tell you. I will tell you. It's not going to hurt you to eat better. I don't know if it's necessarily going to change your progesterone declining. Now, there is a correlation with when you are stressed. The more stressed you are, you're definitely going to have lower testosterone. You're definitely going to have lower progesterone, which then is impacting your sleep and causing more insulin resistance and all that stuff, right? So, I can't definitively say eating more protein or eating more veggies is going to keep your estrogen high or your progesterone higher. I wish I could say that.
Hmm.
It's going to help you. It's going to mitigate some of the symptoms, right? So hopefully if you're having a hot flash, maybe it's not as intense as, it could be, right? It's all relative.
Hmm.
But we do know that weight gain does impact the severity of hot flashes or the
Hmm.
inability to lose weight. So there is that fat component to the whole hot flash thing, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it does.
Not necessarily weight and progesterone per se, but I will say that, the number one problem with progesterone is you're just not sleeping, right? And you're tired and you're groggy and you're irritable, right? And so sleep this is when sometimes, I do hormone replacement therapy in our clinic, right? For some people that need a little extra, I prefer bioidentical hormones, but we will use herbs and vitamins and supplements and say, hey, maybe let's try this vitamin and see if that'll improve, or let's try this herb, chase tree berry to see if it'll help bring your progesterone up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So sometimes hormone replacement therapy
Yeah.
is a good idea for some women, not
Yes, yes.
necessarily everybody's, but it
No.
can help ease the symptoms and there are different options.
There are
There's the
tons of options.
bioidentical
There's
and
tons of
all
options.
natural and
Correct.
yeah, so that is a thing that you have to talk to your medical professional
Correct.
about and
Correct.
decide for yourself if that is going to be a good fit for you. But some of the things that you're talking about with the diet and the body movement help improve the other hormone
Hmm.
balances
For
and
sure.
insulin and cortisol.
Hmm.
All of those are causing fat storage, correct?
Correct. Yes, for sure. Especially cortisol. Cortisol is the number one reason why we have trouble losing weight, especially in the abdomen area. And estrogen also plays a part to that. As estrogen declines, we tend to notice that we gain a little bit of weight in the belly area. But cortisol is evil. It's so
Mm-hmm.
evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we're pumping out when we're stressed.
Yeah, and I can get really complicated when we talk about cortisol. We certainly don't want cortisol to be high, but we certainly don't want cortisol to be low, right? There's two extremes of cortisol that many people are not aware of when it's too high. So it's kind of like the fight and flight mode. If you're being attacked by a bear, we want cortisol to be high because we want that rush of adrenaline so we can run away from this bear, right? However, when you've been under chronic stress for a long time, many, many years, what ends up happening is cortisol starts malfunctioning and it starts declining, right? And so now we're tired, we're exhausted, we can barely get out of bed. Like you're like, oh my God, if nobody was looking, I could probably easily take a nap. I'm just worn out. This is when
Mm-hmm.
you kind of feel burnt out as well, right? And that's just from a low cortisol. So it's about finding it and all the hormones All the hormones. I want to say this. They all are very Goldilocks. We can never have too much estrogen. Too much estrogen can predispose you to endometrial cancer, breast cancer, other things, right? Too much progesterone, as much as I love progesterone, can make you feel bloated and you're retaining water. Nobody wants that. Too much testosterone for females can cause acne and can make you irritable and snappy. So all these hormones really are very delicate. They need to be just right.
Yeah, we need to find that balance.
Correct.
And when you're going through this menopausal phase, they're all changing.
And
Some are
sometimes all
getting
at one time.
lower, some are
Yes.
getting
Yes,
higher, and
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
so there's a lot of different ways you can come at it
Hmm.
with the diet, with the exercise, with the replacement therapy if you
And
decide.
sometimes, yeah, and honestly, sometimes you need a little bit of everything. Sometimes you need to be doing the diet along with the meditation and the stress reduction
Mhm.
and the working out and the hormone replacement therapy. Sometimes it's not just diet that's going to fix everything. It's the everything doing all these small pieces together that kind of
Yeah.
really make you feel more balanced and well-rounded.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, one more thing I want to talk about now before we run out of time, because I get this question a lot, is what about the weight loss medications, the
Hmm.
Ozempic, all of the Manjaro and um I'm not a doctor and I obviously can't prescribe and I always tell people, like, well, that's something you're going to have to talk to your doctor about. So I would just love to pick your brain right now about that. What's it doing? How is it working? And because we see it working, we see people taking
Hmm.
it, we see people losing weight. Why is that? And then pros and cons, because there's also side effects. And I've seen a lot of people take it for a while and gain the weight back when they stop taking it. So can you just speak about that? I know it's
Yeah.
opening a huge can of worms, but it is
Yeah,
on a
no,
lot of
I
people's
talk
minds
about
right
I talk
now.
about GLP-1 medications all the time. There's a lot of pros and cons to it. Listen, if you're diabetic, it really helps with blood sugar, stabilize your blood sugar. It really helps improve that A1C. Yes, the side effects are, you get to lose a little bit of weight, which is why, it's more trendy these days and people want to get on it. It helps with lower blood pressure. It helps with sleep apnea. It helps with fatty liver disease. It helps with kind of preventing heart disease. And so there's a lot of great indications now
And those are all
for
diseases that
yes,
are that are brought on by carrying extra weight.
exactly, exactly. And so this is one of the reasons why I do like using that agent for some people, right? Not everyone qualifies for it, I have some people that are like, I need to, I weigh 120 pounds and I want to get to 110. And I'm like, no, like, like
Yeah.
let's be
Yeah.
reasonable about, how we want to do this.
Typically, what are the qualifications in
Yeah.
case
So
people listening are like, well, I don't know if that's me or not?
yeah, so it gets a little sticky. There's the Wegovy, this extended, the Zepbound that's mainly for obesity, right? The Mounjaro, the Ozempic are mainly for diabetes, right? There's different indications for the different medications. Now you'll see that people are using compounded medications, which are the semaglutide, the tirzepatide. So you have to have a body mass index of over 30 to potentially qualify. And if you don't have that, then you have to have a body mass index over 27 with a comorbid condition, which is being diabetic or have high blood pressure or sleep
Mhm.
apnea
So you have
or
to
fatty
be
liver
experiencing medical issues
to
because
get
of
in
your
to
weight.
get correct to get insurance to cover it, right? This is what we're
Hmm.
talking about to get. And even if insurance covers it, you still may have to pay $1,200 for it. It's unfortunately very expensive, right? So we do know this is why there's some compounded versions of it, which can be a little bit more affordable. But we do know that the FDA is now regulating the GLP-1 medications, especially Eli Lilly with Zepbound is trying to regulate it a little bit more, and now you can buy it directly from Eli Lilly at a cost, as long as you have a prescription, right? So there are some benefits from it. I do like the medication, especially when it comes to blood sugar stability. Like I've seen some wonderful things. Not everyone's a candidate. So if you are obviously pregnant or breastfeeding, or if you have type 1 diabetes, or you have a risk, have a history of what we call acute pancreatitis, or have it's kind of thyroid nodules, or it's called MEN1, MEN2 tumors, medullary thyroid carcinomas, then you're not a candidate for it. So
Yeah.
the other thing that I like to mention about the medication Yes, it does work well, but anytime you lose weight, you're also losing muscle, right? So that comes with just weight loss in general. Taking the medication, we tend to notice that people are losing a little bit more muscle, as well
Mm,
as fat, but more muscle. And this is another reason why, with these medications or without, I highly encourage the strength training and highly encourage the protein because we need to be doing that anyway. But even more so if you happen to be on these medications because we actually want to preserve the muscle mass. Now, one of the complications I see when people come off of it, because there are side effects, and they're mainly GI side effects: nausea, vomiting, constipation for some, diarrhea for some. They can't tolerate it, and the higher the dose you go, sometimes the side effects are more intense, right? So this is one of the reasons why people stop taking the medication, or two, it's expensive. They're like, my insurance is not covering it, or I can't afford to spend $1,200 a month forever on this, right? So we do see people drop off of the medication. And yes, like you said, they do gain the weight back. Um, but the people that do stay on it, I have some patients that have stayed on it for many, many years. And what ends up I see now is as long as the weight loss is slow, they're fine. But when you do rapid weight loss, for some people, we tend to notice a lot of loose skin, saggy skin. And so now I'm using RF microneedling with our Morpheus 8 device to tighten that skin, to tighten the abdomen, to tighten the arms from the weight loss. So there's a lot of things that we're seeing pros and cons with the medication. But one thing I will say is honestly, Sarah, 10, 15 years from now, we may see good things or we may hear bad things about it because there'll be some more long-term data. This medication has only been approved probably it'll be 4 years in July for obesity.
which
So
is
prior
not
to
very
this,
long at
no, it's not
all.
very long. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I
there's
mean,
there's no studies on what this is going to do long
yeah,
term
long
to your
term,
health.
right? I mean, so
Hmm.
far, I did read a couple case reports of a couple patients going blind off of the Ozempic.
Oh, wow.
And I looked into that because my patients were concerned. They're like, Dr. Bindiya, should I
Oh,
stop it? What
yeah.
do I do? Right? Nobody wants to go blind. And the reason that's happening is because of the rapid change in blood sugar. And so I always explain for patients that are diabetic or have uncontrolled blood pressure or even obesity, heart disease, right? They're at increased risk of losing vision and having blindness anyway. They're at a higher risk of
Oh,
population
yeah.
anyway, right?
Yeah.
So now you're
Yeah.
coupling. So then the question is it really the medication or was this going to happen anyway, right? So
Hmm.
there, we don't know. But again, probably by the end of this year, another 2 years from now, there'll be more definitive information of why these people are having, going blind from it, right? The pharmaceutical companies are saying this has nothing to do with the medication, and so we'll see. So,
Hmm.
this is
Yeah.
still new.
So a lot to consider, a lot
Correct.
to consider, but I always say information is power, so it's expensive, there's side effects. It's really only intended for those who are morbidly obese, who have type 2 diabetes, some
And you know
really,
what?
really severe health issues
Correct.
that will get worse if there's not some type of intervention.
Yeah, and I will say, listen, that if you take these medications hoping it's going to save you and that, things are going to be amazing, if you never learn how to eat well and take care of yourself and manage your stress and do all these other things that we talked about earlier, then you are probably going to gain the weight back because you never learned how to, work on some of these other things. You never learned how to manage your stress eating or you're still emotionally eating or all these other things that you could be doing, right? So it's a temporary fix, but it's not always the solution long term
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That is so valuable. I really appreciate you speaking to that because I know a lot of people have that question these days. And I hate that we have to wrap up because I could probably keep you on here for at least another hour. So I'll have to have you on again because all of these subjects are just so important and there's so many different, like we've covered so many things. And the point is, you can't just do one thing if you want to be healthy. You have to come at it with a lot of different tools, some of
Yes.
those medical, some of those lifestyle. And I understand that you have a leptin sensitivity quiz that anyone listening can go check that out and gather some information about their own bodies. It might help with weight loss and some of these things that we've talked about. And so I'm going to be sure to put the link to that quiz in the show notes so that anyone listening can check that out. And I also want to mention that listeners can find you at Dr. Bindiya Gandhi, correct?
So it's
Across
it's
social media,
so it's you can find me everywhere at Dr. Bindia MD. So at
Dr.
Instagram
Bindiya,
and
MD.
TikTok and Facebook, and our website is Dr. Bindia
Excellent.
MD. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I cannot thank you enough. It was such a pleasure, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
And thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. As always, it's an honor to be here with you, and I will see you soon.